Very good morning to all of you. My name is Dr. Gayatri Palat. Today I'm going to speak about understanding palliative care for children with life-limiting conditions. The title of my presentation is Palliative Care for Children with Life-Limiting Condition. So before I start, I'd like to start with screen sharing. Just give me 1 minute. So like I said, we're going to discuss a little bit about understanding pediatric palliative care. What is pediatric palliative care and who provides pediatric palliative care? So what we have to understand in palliative care itself, pediatric palliative care is emerging as a subspecialty and it takes care of special needs of children, siblings, parents, and caregivers. If you look at the WHO definition, the World Health Organization, it defines pediatric palliative care as it aims to improve the quality of life of children facing life-threatening illnesses and their families through the prevention and relief of suffering, which can be physical, psychosocial, or spiritual. If you notice, they talk about prevention and relief. They look at not allowing the child even to get to the level of suffering. So be preventive about the suffering they may encounter if they have life-threatening conditions. If you look at the global picture of population who may require pediatric palliative care, cancer, unlike adult, constitutes much less in number. It's just around 6%. Big chunk of children who may require pediatric palliative care are mostly children with neonatal condition, congenital anomalies. They constitute the biggest chunk, born with some life-limiting conditions. They form the big chunk of it. And of course, you have HIV, AIDS, cardiovascular diseases, and other immune disorders and endocrine disorders. But the cancer also is there, but much less in proportion. But if you still talk about cancer, they say that around 50,000 newly diagnosed pediatric cancer per year in India, they diagnose per year. If you look at the Western population, childhood cancers are considered as a curable condition. With most common cancer in childhood, what you see is leukemia, and leukemia is considered as curable. 80% of children in the West, they get cured. But look at India figures, it's not so good. It's quite bad. And these children, they don't get cured and they die. So they need palliative care. And also, it's a universal thing world over. It's accepted that children, when they're treated for cancer, they undergo repeated painful procedures, they experience high symptom burden, and they tend to receive much more high intensity end of life care, negatively impacting their quality of life and quality of death. Compared to adults, they receive much more high intensity care because physicians, the team, and the family, they find it very difficult to give up. And they keep trying. And in the process, the child keeps getting more and more high intensity care and they suffer. And then eventually they die. So that is the reality in children's palliative care. So when you're thinking about establishing pediatric palliative care or thinking about pediatric palliative care, what is the minimum standard recommended? What is that minimum that you must have? This is I've taken from American Academy of Pediatrics position statement about palliative care for children. And they say that excellence in pediatric palliative care is essential for all hospitals and facilities caring for children. Any hospital or facility, if you're caring for children, you must have pediatric palliative care. In terms of policy, they say that if you have pediatric program in your hospital, the pediatric program serves patients in entire spectrum, starting from perinatal, infancy, childhood, adolescence, young adulthood, and then survivors. Suppose if you're having childhood cancer, which is curable, they survive to become adult, but they need support. So it's a huge spectrum we are talking about. And the hospital must have policies and procedures in place to address the developmental, physical, social, psychological, and spiritual needs of children of all ages. So that is what is being recommended. Other recommendation is that Early integration of pediatric palliative care, not just end-of-life care. They say that palliative care should be offered at diagnosis and continued throughout the course of illness, whether the outcome ends in cure or death. That doesn't, irrespective of that, they should get from the diagnosis, they should get palliative care. This is the recommendation given by American Academy of Pediatrics. What we have to understand is that children with life-limiting conditions often have multiple complex needs. It's not very simple. If you see this child has born with cerebral palsy. This child has severe limitation, disability, physical disability, mental, intellectual disability, and child is growing big and a lot of changes happening in the body, and child needs a lot of support. Child is in pain, can't walk, he needs support with his daily needs, he has no control over bowel bladder, and huge burden on the family, and family is just sitting there taking care of this child. It's so complex and they need a lot of support. So when you're thinking about planning for caring of children with such life-limiting conditions, they need continuity of care over time and across different settings of care and the preferred place of care. What is the child needs? Child wants to be in the home. Means, can we think about a way to provide that care in the child's home? That is what is recommended. The minimum standards when you think about pediatric palliative care is we should have a multidisciplinary team. A pediatric palliative care cannot be offered alone. You have to have team. And you should have seamless transition between settings, between home, hospital, care, hospice, wherever they're going, they should have seamless transition. One designated caregiver, one designated consistent caregiver, which means that it can be a social worker or counselor who will be in charge of that child, and the child, any need, that person will coordinate between different system of settings or a multidisciplinary team. Ideally, they should have 24 hours support because the crisis can happen anytime with this babies born with life-limiting conditions. The another standard they talk about when we are planning pediatric palliative care is that system must ensure the pediatric palliative care members, including volunteers, are adequately trained, staffed, and supported to provide the service offered by the program. Again, they talk about proper training of the team. Without training, you should not be offering pediatric palliative care. And it applies even to the volunteers who get engaged in offering pediatric palliative, in the part of the team offering pediatric palliative care. So this is about the general concept of minimum standards, that how they should have multidisciplinary team, there should be care across the setting, it should be available, there should be seamless transition of care, there should be essential component of training, because you're dealing with children with multiple complex issues, and if you're trained, then only you can offer such kind of better care to the child. A little bit about pain in children, because that is an integral part of any chronic condition. They say that when you're looking at pain in children with cancer, bigger proportion of pain what you see in children with cancer is related to treatment. Then less common is because of cancer, and then 24% unrelated. So most common cause of pain in children with cancer is because of the treatment. And when you have a cancer like leukemia, they undergo repeated painful procedures like finger prick, venipuncture, injections, multiple injections, lumbar puncture, bone marrow, aspiration and biopsy. So both for diagnostic and for treatment, you undergo repeated painful procedures. In adult cancers, it's more about radiation. Of course, there are chemotherapy options, but there's also radiation. But in childhood cancer, it's more about chemotherapy. So you have so many painful procedures happening to them. And when you talk to the children, what is that one thing they hate about being in the hospital? They say that most painful and traumatic event is the procedural related pain. They just hate it. And that's the reason they don't want to come to the hospital. It is said that when you talk about treatment of pain in children, adults with same underlying condition will get 2 to 3 times as many pain medication doses as children, because adults will scream in pain and they demand. Children means you often have a surrogate, the mother or parents. If they report, then you get the pain, you get to address the pain problem. And younger the children, the less likely that he or she will get proper pain management, because smaller children, people are very afraid or reluctant to use more medication, and they just say, okay, let it be, and the child suffers. But is it all right? Let's look at some false myths and belief system we have about children with pain. The first myth: children do not feel pain. It's not true anymore. We know that even a baby, preterm baby inside the uterus, they can experience, they can feel, and when they're born, they can experience pain. In fact, the nervous system is at such a developmental stage, they experience exaggerated pain because of the premature developmental central nervous system. They experience exaggerated pain, but they can't tell you, but they experience. Child do not remember pain. The second myth, which is not true. Many babies, they remember the painful procedures. The body responds much more in a profound way when in future they're exposed to similar kind of pain. We'll come to that. Child cannot report pain. Another myth, which is not true. You should learn to ask the child directly. Every child can report pain. This one study shows that pain in newborn. They say that how common the newborn experience pain, multiple painful procedures. They say that all newborn undergo at least one painful procedure in first few days of life, and an infant admitted in neonatal ICUs undergoes average 14 painful procedures a day. So much of pain happening in the NICU, and we should be mindful of that. This is a study which has shown that a circumcised infants, often circumcision infants, we don't think about much of pain relief, but when they undergo such procedures, it's shown that they experience stronger pain response to subsequent routine vaccination than uncircumcised infants. So why are we discussing pain in children? So what if they experience pain? There are enough studies to show that how the pain can have a very damaging effect on their life, their development. Pain itself can cause high level of pain associated disability, the high risk of developing chronic pain in their adulthood, and there's a lot of post-traumatic stress disorder after that one painful procedure. Suppose you do, I don't know how many of you know that how the bone marrow happens. It can be extremely painful procedure, and the child with cancer often undergo repeated bone marrow procedures. Each time it becomes so painful and traumatic for the child. And it can lead to a lot of post-traumatic stress disorders. Despite this recognition that pain can happen in children, this inadequate prevention and relief of children's pain is still widespread. So, how do we address this problem? A good management of pain in children starts with assessment. Assess the pains, learn to assess the pain. And the assessment starts with self-report. Every child, learn to ask the child directly, do you have pain and how much pain? You'll be surprised at how well they can describe pains. Learn to ask the child directly. Self-report is the gold standard. They say a child, a baby as small as 2-year-old, they'll tell you, I have pain, this much pain or this much pain. 2-year-old can report. 4 to 5 years, they can standardize measures like mild, moderate, severe, this much, this much, this much, or even little pain, more pain, severe pain, like that they can standardize. And 6 to 7, easily they'll talk about 0 to 10 scale. They'll tell you, no, I got 6 out of 10 or 10 out of 10. They can use the scales. So different pain scales which we can use. People often talk about FACES scale also for using in children. We also use sometimes when they don't understand, we talk about money. When children understand money, 4 ana, 8 ana, 12 ana, 1 rupee. Like that we ask, how much is your pain? So coming to this is about the measurement and learning to ask a child and self-report. Coming to the measurement part of it, we are all familiar with WHO analgesic ladder, which we use for chronic persistent pain in adult. Same ladder we apply in children. The only difference is that we talk about only step 1, and step 3 of the ladder. The recent recommendation is that do away with second step of the ladder in chronic persistent pain. Opioids in children. People have a lot of fear around use of opioids in children. In areas such as the pharmacodynamics of opioids, where good data already exists, it remains unacceptable to have children suffer because of misconception and incorrect assumption about appropriate drug use. Appropriate medical use of opioids, when properly monitored, does not lead to addiction in young children and adolescents. It's a very clear recommendation. Enough studies to show that when you know how to use it, properly monitored, properly supervised, in the right dose, in the right way, for a child in pain, does not lead to addiction. So that fear is quite unfounded. Like I said, in the step 2 of the ladder, we have codeine and tramadol, and it's been withdrawn as a step 2 analgesic in the WHO ladder. Now, this is because of they found that a lot of inter-individual, inter-ethnic variability with the enzyme expression and how they metabolized. So it's very risky. So they say don't use, it's not safe. So start with step 1, use opioids. Sorry, step 1 means non-opioids like paracetamol or NSAIDs, and straight away go to step 3, which means that stronger opioids. Stronger opioids like morphine, fentanyl, methadone. All these 3 opioids are quite safe to use in children. And morphine remains a drug of choice. Morphine remains a drug of choice for pain, severe pain in children. And we use the same way like how you use for adult, like 4-hourly morphine. Just like adult, we use 4-hourly morphine. There's no compromise that because it's child, give less frequently. Duration of action of immediate release tablet of morphine is only 4 hours. So even in children as small as 2-year-old or less than even 1-year-old, I would start with small dose but 4-hourly morphine. And just like adults, always remember to use laxatives, and always remember that they may vomit initial few days. So prophylactically, you have to think about antiemetic. But all children should receive stimulant laxatives for constipation. So just like adult, we titrate the dose of morphine, and it is quite safe when you know how to use it, but it remains a drug of choice. For procedure-related pain, we can use many measures like EMLA cream, conscious sedation, and general anesthesia. Most hospitals, I would strongly recommend, please use many of these measures to make sure that the child does not suffer from procedural pain. EMLA cream, we'll come to that. But most important is adopting what they call it as child-centered approach. Listen to the need of the child and the family. Don't get it over with it. Oh, it's a small child, just hold the child firmly and just do the procedure. Don't do that, because that can lead to such fear and such anxiety both in child and among the family, and they dread coming back to the hospital. So whenever you're doing the procedure, explain to the child, hey, I'm going to do this injection here. I know it is painful, but let me see how minimum I can do to what can I do to reduce your pain as much as possible. So how do you want to hold your hand? Can I hold your hand like this? So give the control to the child how they would like to undergo this procedure. So using the child, involving the child in the procedure is active participant, like they say. It brings down over. I'm not saying they will stop screaming. They'll still cry, but at least they know what is happening, and that's much more reassuring. So this is what we call it, integrative child-centered approach. Accurate information to the patients and family and give a sense of control. Use a lot of physical therapies like touch, massage, warmth, distraction, relaxation. These are a few things. While you're doing that, it's very helpful for procedural pain. If you look at these pictures, mother is holding the child, and child can still has a control over the arm. And if you look at the right side, very small babies, you can think about sucrose. They say sucrose can reduce the intensity of pain. So child, just before the procedure, babies, they talk about giving sucrose. And bubbling bubbles, very excellent distraction. When you're doing the procedure, one of the volunteers is blowing the bubble, the child is looking at the bubble. It's a nice distraction. Or reading out stories. And these days we have a lot of these computer applications on the apps, on the mobile. Use that as a distraction. It's very helpful for procedural pain. Amla cream is nothing but it's a local anesthetic. When you apply over the site of injection, keep it as occlusive dosing. You need occlusive dosing, but you need to plan it. It needs at least 45 minutes to 1 hour to work. So when you keep this for 45 minutes to 1 hour and after that remove it and do the procedure, the child will not feel pain. Simple technique, but it goes a long way in reducing the procedural pain which a child otherwise suffers. So we have this displays put in front of the nurse's procedure place where the nurses are most frequently doing the procedure. We put it on wall display, like how to hold the child and that you're doing the procedure. So different ways: chest, bear hug, how to hold back or front, frog holding, suppose you're doing a lumbopuncture, side support. Involve the family to hold the child. The child feels so reassured when the family is around. Otherwise, most of the time what we do, we pull the child away from the family, take to some room and surrounded by strange people and do the procedure. So that's not often helpful and the child feel scared and they suffer. So to conclude, when you're talking about pediatric palliative care, painful procedures and high pain prevalence is there in children with cancer, and pain should be treated. It should not be left untreated. And to treat pain, it starts with good assessment, and self-report is the gold standard. And when you're managing pain in children, the approach is two-step analgesic ladder. It's an effective strategy for management of pain in children. And finally, oral morphine is quite safe in children when you're dealing with pain in children. Thank you. If there are questions, you can chat or you can ask me.